more to my heart. It was definitely not to my ears, but I just knew inside. Okay? So but God speaks in different ways to different people. So my next statement here is, don't assume that God's going to speak to you in a certain way. Because a lot of times we miss God speaking to us because we think when God speaks, it's going to be just like what Pastor Nathanael said, or it's going to be just like what we read about with this person or with that person. Okay, so don't put God into a box. And here's I listed this situation in 1 Kings chapter 19. So if you turn there, this is one of those stories that I think is pretty interesting when God was speaking to Elijah in 1 Kings chapter 19. So what had just happened is in chapter 18, Elijah was up on Mount Carmel. Does anybody remember what happened with Elijah up on Mount Carmel?
Yes.
What happened?
Fire came down from heaven.
Fire came down from heaven. Right. So it was a big competition, if you will.
Oh, that one?
Elijah said to the people, if Yahweh is God, then follow him. But if Baal is God, then follow him. Because the people were halfway following Baal, halfway following God. And he said, stop. If Baal's God, follow him. But if Yahweh is God, follow him. And don't keep wavering between these two opinions. And so they did their thing. And nothing happened when the prophets of Baal called on Baal to do something. Nothing happened. But when Elijah called on Yahweh, fire came down from heaven. It burned up the rocks. It burned up the water. It burned up the sacrifice. It burned up everything. And everybody fell down. Whoo! Yahweh is God. We will follow him. They're scared. And so then at that point he went and killed all of the prophets of Baal. Elijah had said, round them all up and kill them. So the people did that. And then after that, Jezebel, who was the queen, and she was the one who was really promoting the worship of Baal, she sends a message to Elijah and said, let the gods deal with me ever so severely if by tomorrow I don't make your life like one of those prophets you had killed. So she said, I'm going to kill you, and if you're not dead by tomorrow, she was calling down a curse on herself. So what did Elijah do? He ran. He was afraid. Even though God had just done that big thing, but he was afraid at that point. So now we're picking up in 1 Kings 19. He had fled through the desert, and he's hiding out, and he came to a cave, and an angel came to him and helped him along the way. And then finally, we'll start actually back a little bit. Let's start in the middle of verse 9. Well, we can read from verse 9. It says, there he went into the cave and spent the night. So he was running, he gets to the cave, and then it says, and the word of the Lord came to him, what are you doing here, Elijah? Okay, he replied, I have been very zealous for the Lord God Almighty. The Israelites have rejected your covenant, broken down your altars, put your prophets to death with the sword. I am the only one left, and now they're trying to kill me too. Okay? So that's how Elijah was feeling. Now, we can take a moment to step through some of the way he felt, because the things that he was feeling were not true. They weren't true. But to him, they felt true. He felt like he was the only one. And he didn't list the fact, it was focused solely on him, right? I have been zealous. He didn't say, well, God, you just did this big thing. You brought fire down from heaven. Thank you. So his focus wasn't on God, but it was on him. So he was saying, I've been zealous. The Israelites have broken your covenant. Put your prophets to death with sword. I'm the only one left. Now they're trying to kill me too. That's true, they were trying to kill him. But then the Lord said, go out and stand in the mountain in the presence of the Lord, for the Lord is about to pass by. So God was going to come by. And then it says, then a great and powerful wind tore the mountain apart and shattered the rocks before the Lord. So a huge wind, I mean a wind able to shatter rocks. We're not talking about, just right? We're talking like tornado, hurricane force wind is able to rip apart rocks, right? Extremely powerful wind. And then it says, but the Lord was not in the wind. And then it says, after the wind there was an earthquake. Okay, so the whole ground shakes. He's in this mountain. The ground shakes. It says, but the Lord was not in the earthquake. And then after the earthquake came a fire. Spontaneous fire. Now think, has God been in a fire before?
Yes.
Yes.
When?
Burning bush.
Burning bush. When else?
Pillar of fire leading the Israelites out.
Pillar of fire up on the mountain, right? Has God been in a strong wind?
Yes.
Day of Pentecost.
Pardon? Yeah, Pentecost. He hadn't experienced that then yet. But
Right.
what happened with the parting of the Red Sea? A strong wind blew. It parted the sea and dried it up. Was God speaking and working in that wind then?
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. So what about the earthquake? Has God worked before? Been in an earthquake?
Yes.
When?
I don't.
What about when the earth split and those two guys?
Okay, yes, so there was Korah's rebellion, the earth opened up and swallowed them. And there was another time when the mountain was shaking. Where was the mountain shaking?
Sinai.
Mount Sinai, yeah. God's presence was so powerful that mountain shook and it burned. And that was God's presence. But notice here, God is not in those things. So a lot of times we think that because God did that before, that's got to be how he does it for me now. And if it's not that, then it's like, oh, okay, God must not be speaking to me. We're waiting for him to have an earthquake. We're waiting for him to shake the mountains, for the winds to blow, for all of these things. We think when God speaks, it's going to be this thunder or I don't know. We don't know exactly what it's going to be, but we think that it's different from what we're experiencing, right? That's the thing. And so the key is here, don't look at that other things that God has done and say, that's how God will speak to me. Maybe he will. But don't limit it. So notice what happens next. So he says, so after the earthquake came a fire, but the Lord was not in the fire. And after the fire came a gentle whisper. Just a and it says, when Elijah heard it, he pulled